What's up? Welcome to my channel. My name is Malika. I'm so happy you decided to stop by. I am an American expat currently living in Lebanon, and I'm filming this to you today from Zanzibar, Tanzania. That's why you can see this setup is a little bit different than my usual in my other videos, but I wanted to hop on here really quick and talk about my last trip to South Africa, because I think that there's a lot of negative information and a lot of stuff trending right now about travel to South Africa, and I had this video on my to-do list for quite some time. I was thinking I would do like my South Africa trip, my Tanzania trip, and just kind of build out an Africa playlist, but I was like, let me just hop on here really quickly and do this now, partially because there is so much information trending about South Africa with this new like Omicron variant, and also because I just want to encourage people to keep Africa at the top of the mind when planning travel, because it is just such an amazing continent. There's so much to experience here, and I don't need to be discouraged by all the negativity that might be happening right now. So without further ado, I'm going to hop right into some tips and FAQs I learned from my experience traveling alone to South Africa. So my trip to South Africa was actually like one of the best times I've ever had in my life. I traveled alone for about 8 days. I'll tell you how I ended up being alone and how much it costs and all that stuff. But I would even say that if you are thinking about planning a trip right now, do not let those restrictions hold you back, because honestly, like when things start to open, the flights will be like dirt cheap. There will be all kind of deals to lure back tourists and get things back up to their pre-COVID levels. So I would say definitely like keep your eyes peeled for fare sales, even for like later down the line into 2022 or 2023, because restrictions don't last forever and things will always come back, and it's always going to be like a hot destination. So there's some FAQ about traveling to South Africa. Number one, how expensive is it? So I actually did some flight hacking and I ended up getting an amazing fare sale. So my round trip flight from New York JFK to Johannesburg was literally only $500. Like it was just an unbelievable fare sale. So I booked it and it had 24-hour cancellation, because that's something most airlines do. They will give you a refund if you're not ticketed within 24 hours. So I was like, I'm just gonna book this and then like invite all my friends, see if anyone wants to come. We'll figure out hotels later. I think I booked it in summer and it was for February. So it was still like 6 months in advance, and there was still like a lot of time to kind of plan and like save for hotels and whatever. But I was like, it's $500. All my friends have jobs, no one has kids. Like let's all, let's get this flight. Let's go to South Africa. So I sent it to all my friends. Literally nobody booked it, right? So I told people, I was like, guys, get on this right away. Nobody did. Someone said that she went back and looked at it like 3 days later, and it was back up to like their normal price, which was like $1,200. And at that point I was locked in, and I was like, you know what, I'm still gonna go. And I decided pretty quickly that I was still going to go by myself, because I was just like not gonna miss out that opportunity. I have traveled by myself alone before. At that point I traveled a lot in Europe on my own. I'd been to the Caribbean on my own. I'd never been to South Africa. I'd never been that far by myself, but I was just kind of like, you know what, it's a $500 ticket. It's like, I'm not gonna miss this chance. And like people wanna miss their own opportunities, that's their business, but it wasn't gonna be mine. And again, I still felt like I had plenty of time to save for like other aspects of the trip, like get the vacation days in, save for hotels, plan an itinerary. So I was like, you know what, it's $500, I'm doing it, like this is happening. So that is basically how I ended up going by myself. And so the flight was not expensive. Normally the flight would be your most expensive thing, because if you're flying from the US, yeah, that would be a pretty significant ticket if you're not getting a fare sale or getting a deal. But what you will find is when you're there on the ground, things are like pretty affordable. So between like food, going out, drinks, entertainment, all that stuff is like relatively cheap. I think that I spent around like $1,200 all in, between my flights, my entertainment, my going out on tours, and that was like for an 8-day trip. And so when I was in Johannesburg, I stayed in like a nicer hotel close to the airport, just because I was kind of going in and out. Like I booked my round trip from Johannesburg to New York because that was the fare sale. But then I was like, I don't want to stay in Joburg for 8 days. I want to kind of see other parts of the country while I'm here. So then I got a second cheap trip from Johannesburg to Cape Town, which was like $150 on like a local like domestic carrier. I think the flight time was around like 2 hours, like it really, maybe under 2 hours even, like it was not a bad flight. So basically my itinerary was I landed from JFK to Johannesburg. Went out that night, stayed a night. The next afternoon, I went to Cape Town, spent like 4 or 5 full days in Cape Town. I spent the bulk of the trip in Cape Town. Took that cheapy regional flight back and then spent like another day and a half or 2 days in Joburg and then went home from there. So that was basically like the full span of my trip. But yeah, and again, so for all that, it was only like $1,200, which I don't think is that expensive for an 8-day trip. Like, not good at quick math, but you're definitely spending like under $100 a day. Like, I think that's like $80 a day. If anyone's better at math, better at quick math than me, let me know in the comments. But I think that would be around like $80 a day. And again, I was staying at a pretty nice hotel in Joburg, so I felt like I splurged a little bit on that for those 2 days. And it was just worth it. It was fine. Question number 2, how is it traveling solo? I love traveling alone, and I was really happy to be able to have a vacation alone. Like, I have no qualms about traveling by myself. I've traveled all over Europe by myself. I've been in the Caribbean by myself. So again, like, I'm not squeamish or scared of traveling by myself. So if you are someone who's afraid of traveling alone, this might be a pretty aggressive trip to take for your first time being on vacation alone. So maybe think about somewhere you might be a little bit more comfortable, like somewhere that's a little more comfort zone for you before you kind of just like jump to like a really far-flung destination where, you know, a lot can happen. But if you are a seasoned traveler and you're used to traveling by yourself, then I would say don't really worry about going to South Africa alone if you're someone who enjoys solo travel. But I never felt lonely at all, like even though I was by myself for essentially 8 days. So in Johannesburg, like I said, I stayed in like a nicer hotel by the airport just because of my itinerary, like it just made the most sense. And then in Cape Town, I stayed in a hostel, and I picked a hostel, number one, to save money because it was probably like $40 a night for a private room, and which if you are a hostel traveler, not everything is a scary 16-person bunk. You can book a private room in a hostel. It'll be probably 2 or 3 times the cost of the bunk, depending on how many people are in the bunk bed thing. So I think that they had bunks of like 8 people co-ed for like $15-20 a night. And then they had privates, like with your own private and your own private bathroom, which were like $40. So that's expensive for a hostel, but for me, I was like, you know what, done. But I picked a hostel mostly because if I wanted to meet people to hang out with, hostels are just naturally a lot more social. And so if you're by yourself and you want to find a group to go to dinner with, you want to find a group to go out to drinks with, you want to like, you know, you found people who are doing a tour, you want to hop on a tour with them, it's just easier to meet people in that structure if you're a solo traveler. So just check out reviews thoroughly, make sure they're not like a sketchy, dirty place, and definitely splurge for the private room and private ensuite bathroom. So that way you do have your privacy and you're not like sharing a bunk or sharing a bathroom, and then your stuff is like a little bit more secure. And so part of the way I was able to socialize and make friends was by staying in a hostel. And the other thing I did was I booked like probably 2 full-day group tours. So one was like visiting a couple of wineries with like a group of 8 people, and then one was I think a hike, a drive around, a picnic, a stop on Penguin Beach. Like it was a whole full day, you know, South Africa's greatest hits kind of day tour, and that was like a group of like 6. So it was nice to kind of get out of the hostel, see town, be with other people in a group, like not be alone like the entire 8 days. And also you have people built in to like kind of take your pictures and like help you with that, make friends, all that stuff. So that's another good tip for solo travelers anywhere. It's just kind of like join one of these tour groups. You can find them on Viator, TripAdvisor, even Airbnb Experiences, and that's a great way to kind of pack in some group activities. So even when you're traveling alone, you're not like completely isolated. Question number 3. Big question I get a lot about South Africa is South Africa safe? So, and the answer to that is yes and no. I was mostly safe on that trip. There was one little scary incident I'll tell you guys about. Definitely like a little attempted mugging in Cape Town, which I'm laughing about now, but we ended up getting like really lucky. And so basically I was at the hostel, I was having drinks at the bar with a couple of people. There was like a really cute female bartender that night, and we're all hanging out, and it was around like 7:38, so we're looking for a place to go to dinner. And I was like asking her like, oh, like where do you recommend we go out to dinner, right? And she said if you go about 5 minutes down the road from the hostel, you'll find like a nice busy strip where there's like a lot of restaurants, bars, and shops. So it's basically like go down this like long main road, which is kind of like a busy road, a lot of traffic. There's gas stations, there's stuff, you know, like bodega type stores on either side, and then bust a left, and then you're on like a nice strip full of restaurants, bars, kind of like if you're from New York, a Soho-y meatpacking type area. And I had seen that strip by day. I think I walked a little bit of it, but in the opposite direction from where she was pointing. So it's kind of okay, I'm familiar with this place. I've seen this by day. And I asked her, is it safe to walk there at night? She said, oh yeah, it's totally fine. Like people walk it all the time from the hostel. Like that's just kind of like a good hangout zone. It's like safe, it's fine, don't worry about it. So I was still not convinced, and I was still not going to walk the strip alone by myself at night. Like even though I walked it by day, I was like, I'm never gonna walk this at night. That's just not gonna happen. One of the other guys at the bar was also like in on this conversation. He's like, oh, I'll go with you. I could go to dinner. And he was actually like an American dude. I think he was either on leave from the army or just got out of the army. I don't remember which one. But I'm like, yeah, you seem like a safe bet. I'll walk with you. You know, big, jacked, like kind of tall white guy. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll hang out with you. You can handle the walk. So we walk down the road there. Everything's fine. Go to dinner. Chill at the bars. Great, nice little walk. Nice little town. We're walking back. And probably like maybe after we turn the corner and we go a block and we're back on that long road, the long strip that's like the two-way intersection, we see these two guys, a guy and a girl, who they start following us and asking us for money. And they kind of were getting like a little bit close, like uncomfortably close. And then we're walking, and basically like I'm on, I guess, like the inside of the road, then there's him, and then they're both like on the outside of the road. And then after a couple of feet, they basically split. So the girl came like on my side next to me, and then they're like kind of like boxing us in. And so they split, they're boxing us in, and then the guy pulls out a knife. And then so army guy like immediately like shoves me forward. Like he gives me like a really hard shove forward. So I kind of clear them, and he says, run. And so I'm out like a motherfucker. Like I'm like running down the road, and at this point the hostel's in sight, so I'm like fucking running, gunning it, and I look back once just to see, number one, is he okay? Number two, are they chasing us? Did they bring their friends? Whatever. So I look back and I see him kind of like facing off with them, like in like an aggressive stance, and I can't really see the two of them anymore because he's kind of like a big dude. Like I can see feet a little bit, but I did like a passing glance. He's not dead, didn't get stabbed, so I'm still running. I look back again, because again, I'm not hearing anything. I don't know what's happening behind me. I look back again, and then they're walking away, and he's walking toward me, like walking toward me normal. And so I'm like, okay, he's walking toward me normal. They're walking away. He's not injured. He's not hurt. So I kind of like paused, and I'm like, oh, what just happened? And then he caught up to me. At this point, we're like less than 60 seconds from the hostel. Like it's literally right there. And I'm like, yo, like, so what the fuck? Like, what happened? And he's like, yeah, I just like stood my ground and made them back off. And I'm like, okay, good thinking. You know, way to save the day. And we went back to the hostel. Like, he didn't give them any money. He wasn't hurt. Like, nothing happened. It was fine. But after that experience, like, even though this bartender who works there, lives there in the area, says people go there all the time, said it was safe, don't walk around at night just because, you know, it might be safe some nights, nothing might have ever happened to anyone else, or you could just be in an area where you're like an easy target. And what I thought about later was the fact that like those people or anyone who wants to rob someone on that road knows there's a hostel with a lot of people, knows there's a bunch of restaurants over there, and that people frequently walk that path. And so you could just be kind of camped out looking for an easy victim or an easy target. And some people might have been easier than others. I wouldn't have thought we were very easy because he was like a pretty sizable guy. They decide to try their luck. So, you know, and you never know when someone's gonna like try their luck or when someone's gonna watch you, or if it's like there's 3 of them and only 1 or 2 of you. So probably I would just advise to not walk at night unless maybe you're in a big group. Like if there's 5 or 6 of you, you're probably less likely to be targeted. But just again, like I would just avoid walking at night after that experience. Take taxis, even if it's like a stupid close distance. And there are actually plenty of Ubers in South Africa, in Cape Town, so we could have just Ubered. It would have been like a 2-minute drive, which would have felt stupid, but you know, whatever, just like safety first. And after that experience, I think that I do rethink even more carefully about what it means traveling safely as a woman, because I assumed I'm not gonna walk by myself, but I'll walk with this guy, it'll be fine. And it turned out being okay, but it could have also turned out really, really bad. And then when I got to Johannesburg, I actually did not walk like almost at all, probably because I was a little bit shaken up by that experience. So when I came back, I had 2 full days to explore, which normally I would have like walked a little bit more, but I just really didn't walk around at all in that town, just because like it is more of a city. It felt a little bit sketchier than Cape Town, and I was like fully by myself then. So I was just like, I am not really with this at all. So even though it is pretty cheesy, and I kind of used to judge people who do this, I actually did the hop on hop off bus in Johannesburg, which again, I thought they're stupid. I thought they're for old people like who can't walk around a city, but I ended up doing it because everything I wanted to see was pretty far spread out. And I didn't super feel safe navigating that with public transportation or trying to call Ubers and then waiting somewhere where you don't necessarily know where you're waiting and how busy or safe it is, like waiting for your taxi or your car. So it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna like err on the side of caution, be a little bit lazy, buy this cheap bus. And also it was like way cheaper than trying to take a bunch of Ubers to all the sites. So I got on it and I actually like really enjoyed it, so much that I will probably do it again in a different city. It just like literally took you door to door to every single major tourist site you would want to see in town. You can get on and off of no schedule. Like it's not like having a tour guide telling you what time you have to be there and what time you have to go. Like, so you do have kind of that freedom to explore and stay as long as you want in one place, skip a place if you're like, oh yeah, I'm not really into that stop. And it was really like nice and flexible and affordable. So that's what I did in Joburg. I spent like about a day riding this bus, going to like a ton of the museums, a ton of the sites, and spending my time like really like in those places and like really absorbing the history of it, because that's a lot, which I'll talk about in my next point. But it was really nice to do that at a leisurely pace and then be able to kind of like process it versus like having to go back into the logistics of now I need to get a taxi to go to the next place, or now like how am I going to get around. Like it just made it a lot easier having this big obnoxious red bus to kind of facilitate all of that. So where do you go and what do you do in South Africa? And that honestly really depends on your interests, like what you're really into. But I would definitely say take advantage of the culture, take advantage of the heritage, the rich history, and also just the natural beauty of the country. Like it really is just an incredible, special place to be. So I spent my time in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. I spent more time in Cape Town than Joburg for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to spend some time on the beaches. I was going in February, which is like the dead of winter in New York. I wanted to enjoy some nice weather and some sun and some beaches. So that's part of it, was just like the timing why I decided to spend more time in Cape Town to see those beaches and that part of the country. And also I also knew that Johannesburg would be really like emotionally heavy and kind of draining for me, which is why I structured the trip like the way that I did. So a little bit the first day and then a little bit the last day, and then like a nice break in the middle to kind of emotionally process everything that I was absorbing. Because when you're in a place that has the kind of history South Africa has, and you do put yourself in it and try to learn about it, which I think you should as a traveler, like you're not just vacationing, you're traveling, and part of that is experiencing the culture, then you do kind of have to be prepared for the emotional burden and the aftermath that you might feel when you're exposing yourself to that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it was hard. It was emotionally draining and heartbreaking walking through the Apartheid Museum, seeing Soweto and like seeing the impact of that history and how it still affects the people of South Africa today. But it was definitely worth it, and it would have not been as enriching a trip if I just sat on the beach for 8 days and like drank. So it was definitely like, you can't go to a place like South Africa and not experience the culture and the history, and you're doing yourself a disservice if you do. So I would definitely suggest starting in Cape Town, or spending time in Cape Town, spending time in Johannesburg. Those are kind of probably, I think, the most popular cities. If you have a longer trip, you can find like a safari. I did not have time for that, so I did like a little mini safari park that's about an hour and a half from Johannesburg, which you can do in a day, but there's no like big game. There's just like, you know, a nice little village. And I think there's like baboons and like, you know, gazelles or something like that. Maybe not gazelles, maybe they're antelope, but they're like the smaller animals. So that's something that you can definitely consider. I've heard Durban is an amazing city. There's just like so much in South Africa. So really you could do this in multiple trips, go to multiple cities. But the first time I probably would say, do Cape Town and Johannesburg, book a cheap regional flight in between the cities. So look for the best fare to get you there on the ground, and then just kind of bounce around from there at your own leisure. And so that is it, guys. Hope these tips helped. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you're planning a trip to South Africa, let me know in the comments, and make sure you stay tuned for my Tanzania vlogs, because we are currently here in Zanzibar for a week. And also stay tuned to my channel for more about expat life in Beirut, times I've lived in Italy, and then general travel advice and all that stuff. And if you like this video and my other content, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.